Anna Weber, a 24-year-old administrative assistant, sits at her post, a shiny oak desk in a smoky administrative office, grinding out paperwork for the Third Reich. Her fingers were smudged with ink from stamping national identity cards for every German over 15 years old. She checks names, birth dates, and photographs against mountains of forms to enter into national registries that dictate who can do what, where, and with whom. Today, a man approaches, his hands trembling, seemingly unable to make eye contact with the young blue-eyed clerk. He presents his paperwork, all marked with red J's, indicating that he was Jewish. After Anna noticed the scarlet letters, it was then her struggling to make eye contact. Her stamp lands with a thud, minting the first-class ticket to restricted rights or a camp. Probably both. How many people had her ink pad condemned? Across Nazi Germany, millions of citizens carry these Kennkarten or national identification cards, many ignorant that they're tools for the surveillance state. But it was necessary for national security and her safety. At least that's what they told her. Today, as states introduce real ID, Anna's story serves as a warning. At what point does the government cross the line from safety to control? May 7th, 2025 was the deadline to upgrade your US driver's license or state ID to real ID, or they say you'll need a passport and potentially face additional security checks at airports. But what is real ID? From the TSA, the Real ID Act, passed by Congress in 2005, enacted the 9/11 Commission's recommendation that the federal government, quote, set standards for the issuance of sources of identification, such as driver's licenses and identification cards, end quote. Some say it's for our safety, others say it's a gross violation of personal freedoms. Which is it? Thanks for stopping by NPC Overrider, where we challenge mainstream source code to develop independent thought, one user story at a time. Grab your papers, pick out a good hiding spot, and let's check out the latest programming. Okay, let's take a look at the mainstream argument that says Real ID is here for national security and our personal safety.
You come to an airport checkpoint starting at midnight, you are going to need to show a Real ID compliant form of identification. Here's what that looks like. Look for a little star up in the corner of the ID, or if you have a passport or a handful of other compliant IDs at TSA.gov, you'll breeze right through. If not, you're going to get pulled aside for additional screening. TSA says their goal is to get everyone onto their flights, but they're saying if you have that legacy ID, be here at least 3 hours early.
Supporting point number 5 says, Real ID prevents identification fraud. Identity fraud is a growing concern these days. In 2024, the U.S. Federal Trade Commission received more than 1.1 million complaints of identity theft and about 2.6 million complaints of related fraud, totaling losses over $12.7 billion. That's according to Experian. Real ID requires verification of identity documents such as birth certificates and social security numbers, making it harder for criminals to impersonate victims. Point number 4, Real ID improves aviation security. Flying is already scary for people as it is, especially with the recent uptick in human and mechanical safety errors. Passengers don't want to add terrorism to the list with increased cases of identity fraud. By ensuring only verified individuals board domestic flights, Real ID reduces terrorism risks, which align with the 9/11 Commission's recommendations. Point number 3, Real ID secures sensitive facilities. With global tensions between places like Russia, North Korea, and China, there is a call for concern on the ground level with potential bad actors gaining access to sensitive locations such as military bases, data centers, or nuclear facilities. Locally, we continue to have security concerns at places like hospitals with people trying to steal babies. In 2022, Jasenia Marone attempted to steal a baby after impersonating a nurse at the Riverside University Health System in California. Amanda Porter was arrested last year after falsifying documents to gain employment as a nurse in Virginia. Real ID addresses all these concerns. Point number 2, Real ID standardizes state ID systems. You can have 49 states with strict security standards, but it only takes one weak link in the chain to raise risk levels. According to Fake ID BossNet, state identification, such as those in Ohio, Mississippi, and Georgia, have traditionally been easier to counterfeit. On the other hand, Maine and New Jersey have been more challenging to fake due to security features like built-in holograms. Real ID standardizes security nationwide to fill these gaps. Point number 1, Real ID aids law enforcement. Back in the 1920s, one of the main reasons why gangsters were able to get away with robbing banks for so long was due to the lack of interstate cooperation and information sharing among law enforcement. Real ID requires states to share their ID and driver history databases such as the State-to-State Verification Service and driver history records. With real-time data sharing across state lines, law enforcement can quickly identify fugitives, suspects, or missing persons. This also helps with immigration services by identifying illegal aliens throughout the country. Wow, identity fraud, terrorism, stealing babies, things are getting pretty serious.
I guess you could say things are getting pretty serious.
But let's check out the rebuttal that says Real ID is one of the greatest threats to civil liberties.
The American people strongly oppose the instituting of a national identification card. The authority was given for a national ID card in 1996. I've been working very hard to try to repeal this authority. Today, we would have had an opportunity under the transportation bill to repeal this authority and to prevent a national ID card from coming into existence. Unfortunately, that will not be permitted due to the rule that is coming up under the transportation bill. I think this is a serious mistake. It's not just 30 or 40 or 50% of the American people who reject this. Almost all Americans reject the notion of a national ID card. And I find it a shame that we're not able to vote on this and repeal this authority. It was never intended that the Social Security number would be the universal national identifier. It's given to a child at birth, and you can't even be buried without it. So the national ID card, when instituted, will be used for everything, to get on an airplane, to get a job, open up a bank account, whatever we want to do, we will have to show our papers. This is un-American. It is something that we should not be doing, and unfortunately, we will not get to vote on it today.
Here's supporting point number 5, centralized data risks. Creating a central database to store personal information across states increases the risk of government overreach. Lone wolf bad actors within government could use this information to target citizens across state lines, or agencies and political parties could attack opponents in the future. The current administration might promise one thing, but what about the next? Point number 4, large-scale surveillance. Centralizing all Americans' information at a single point opens opportunities for the federal government to track citizens' physical and digital movements, a significant assault on privacy rights. Between linked travel records and ID scans at places requiring identification, the government can quickly become a surveillance state without oversight or explicit consent from private citizens, which is the case in China. Point number 3, intrusive data requirements. The Real ID application process requires citizens to submit sensitive documents to include social security numbers, birth certificates, and proof of address. Sending this information to a federal database may feel overly invasive to many people, as there's always potential for misuse each time we bring these documents out of the safe. Point number 2, Real ID's cybersecurity threats. A centralized federal database containing the fingerprints, photos, names, addresses, social security numbers, and birth certificates for all Americans is a dream for cyber criminals and adversarial foreign governments. With data breaches constantly in the news, do you want your private info to be so vulnerable? It's kind of like one of those phone cases that hold your driver's license, debit card, and cash. You lose one thing, you lose it all. Point number 1, Real ID's chilling effect on freedom. Such overreaching standards can create a secondary class of Americans, as citizens may opt out of obtaining compliant IDs or participating in activities potentially requiring them, such as air travel, voting, or purchasing firearms. Real ID could easily become an employment requirement like so many other things. This means Americans must choose between exercising constitutional rights or submitting to the surveillance state. On April 30th, 1945, after Eva Braun, Hitler's mistress and wife, for a short time anyway, swallowed her cyanide capsule, and before the Fuhrer turned the pistol on himself, he might have been flattered to know how much we talk about him all these years later. Yet the constant Nazi this, Hitler that sprouts up on all sides of political arguments tends to dilute positions and points. But if we're to live up to never again, then shouldn't we call it out when we see bricks being laid in the road to tyranny? Of course, there's plenty of other authoritarian regimes throughout history that we could reference, such as Fascist Italy, the Soviet Union, Maoist China, apartheid South Africa, as well as present-day China, North Korea, Russia, and Ukraine, all of whom did or still do trample on citizens' rights with social credit systems, national surveillance, and imposing national identification systems. If we could rest assured that the government wouldn't use centralized data nefariously, then perhaps more of us would be on board with Real ID. Yet, sadly, federal law enforcement in the U.S. has already demonstrated political affiliations, such as surveilling parents in Loudoun County who protested transgender ideology and CRT in public schools, and the tech bros have already shown us that they're willing to join in on the fun and censor users for their political and cultural views, as we saw in the Twitter files. Never mind what Edward Snowden uncovered about the U.S. government constantly spying on law-abiding U.S. citizens. But this is about more than Real ID. Anna Weber, our fictional character from the intro, watched her country devolve from a central beacon of modern civilization into an absolute hell on earth. She wouldn't tell you that it was over a national ID, but I bet she'd tell us it sure as hell was a snowflake in the avalanche that would eventually destroy a nation and millions of lives. But don't worry, this time, it's for your safety. Well, that's going to do it for this version of NPC Overrider. I'm your lead engineer, Greg. What do you think? Is Real ID really for our safety, or do national ID systems have a bad enough track record to prove that we need to put a stop to it? If you want to help me save the NPCs, please set the like button to true and open up a ticket in the comments section if you have an idea for a future release. But for now, it's about beer 30. Thanks for stopping by. Have a good one.